introduce what we're doing here today. This is something new for us, not the rally call, of course, but what we're doing on the rally call. Two of our bankers have had their first post-COVID trips, and we thought this would be a great opportunity for them to first share with you in various categories of what were their worries before the trip and what took place during the trip and so on, and addressing probably a lot of your questions in advance, and then opening up for questions and answers. And we want to leave a lot of time for that because we're anticipating that many of you will have lots of questions. Interestingly, both of these trips were to the East Coast, to beach destinations. Kathy Bengtson went to Virginia Beach on a 5-day, 4-night tour with Hospitality Tours on April 16th to 20th, just got back. And Amber Thomas from Geneseo, Illinois, was on a Charleston, Savannah, and Jekyll Island 7-day tour with Mayflower Tours. So in both cases, Mayflower and Hospitality, this was also their first post-COVID tour. So in both cases, everybody was kind of experiencing this uniquely. So both Mayflower Tours and I, representing Hospitality Tours, are here as well in order to address any questions that you have from the PTO perspective. And what we've done is we've broken down the topics, which you may have seen in yesterday's invitation, to 8 specific points that Amber and Kathy are going to alternate. For example, in the first one, dealing with pre-departure preparation, safety and the call with tour guides and that sort of thing, Amber's going to start. She's going to talk about that. Then Kathy will go on to the second one, which is airlines and airports and that sort of thing. And if Kathy wants to make any closing comments on Amber's topic, she'll do that. And Amber can do the same on Kathy's and so on. So as much as possible, it'd be good, I think, to get through the whole, both of their presentations, if you will, before we get to the Q&A. So you might want to write down on a piece of paper the questions that come up in your mind. They may get answered later on. That's why I figure we ought to wait till the end. And hopefully we'll leave a good half hour or so for those questions and proceed from there. So if you're good with that, Amber, why don't we start with you? And this has to do with all the things that Amber had to face before ever leaving. So it's all the various things that help her get prepared and confident in her travel. Don't forget to unmute yourself, Amber.
Got to get back in the swing of this whole thing. Hello, everybody. I hope you're all doing well. It's so nice to see everyone's faces. And congratulations, Kelsey, on that baby boy. What a blessing. That's so awesome. Okay, we're going to chat about our wonderful tour that we experienced with Mayflower Cruises and Tours. And that was to Savannah, Charleston, and Jekyll Island. The safety and pre-departure information and things that we discussed with our tour guides. And first off, Mayflower Cruises and Tours prepared a few documents in advance of the tour. I wanted to be able to share as much as possible with the people who were, still kind of hesitant. Some were still hesitant on going, some were all out and let's go and let's do it. And I wanted them to kind of have as much information as possible prior to departure. And so Mayflower sent us information that we could forward on to them, kind of give them an outline of what was going to be expected with temperatures and things like that throughout the trip. I unfortunately left that information at home at my office. It's been a whirlwind today because our internet at work is not working yesterday and today. So I got there and then had to scurry to get here to set up. So I did leave that behind. But I can send that on if you need, and I'm certain that Mayflower can share with you also what that is too. So I do apologize for that. But it was great information, helping them understand what they should expect while they're on tour. It also gave wonderful information that they would feel comfortable that Mayflower was taking charge of this and that they felt it was very serious about the situation with COVID, and that they had thought it very well through. So I felt comfortable sending that information. One of the things I wanted to really take home with this is that everyone knew that masks were going to be worn throughout this trip. We didn't want someone to show up thinking, oh, well, I don't believe in them. I'm just not going to wear mine. And then we didn't want to have that become an issue with someone. We just needed them to know up front. So one of the things is that they did discuss is that temperatures would be taken throughout the tour on probably a daily basis. It also gave guidelines as stringent as if they were to have a temperature of over 100.4, that they could be asked, if they had symptoms and such, that they could be asked to seek medical testing to figure out whether they had COVID or not. And also that they knew and would agree that they would be quarantined until they knew that they were not contaminated with the COVID. So that was important that they understood that too. Also, Mayflower reassured us that the insurance had been changed for the trip insurance. So it went out from, I don't remember what the normal amount of time frame is, that the insurance would pay for extended, but they extended the insurance to pay for 14 days. In case they were quarantined, you would be covered 14 days at, I think, $200 a day toward your lodging and medical meals and things like that. So they actually changed the insurance a little bit to accommodate those 14 days that you possibly could be quarantined. So that was a big deal that they knew upfront what was going on with that. Switching gears, our tour manager, we were notified and swapped the contact information. And so about 10 days prior to our tour, I started talking with our tour managers, and they were very proactive in contacting everyone along our itinerary to make certain that they were definitely open, that they were ready for us, prepared for us, things that was going to go smoothly, looking in advance of the things in the area, that there are things for us to do. I do know that our tour manager did figure out that on Jekyll Island, the restaurant their of choice, the evening we were to be there, they were going to be closed. She ended up flip-flopping to the last two, or those two meals. So we were able to stay on Jekyll Island and enjoy that restaurant right there. So we didn't have to get transported off to another restaurant. And then the hotel, then that was the other meal the hotel flip-flopped with. And so she did a fantastic job in planning those kind of things. The due diligence that was, I think, really important, because so many things had changed. Things, that restaurant certainly might have been open, but something else was different because of COVID. There might not have been anything else available for us in that area, where normally you would have shopping or somewhere else to see and that kind of thing. And so they researched those kind of things and then made the itinerary work. So that we were aware of what was open and what wasn't open, and whether the pedicabs were available or whether they weren't. She did all of those kind of things to make certain that things were going to be smooth for us. Temperatures were taken, and it was basically daily. It wasn't necessarily, okay, walk on the coach, I'm taking your temp. It might have been that morning, and then the next afternoon they caught you getting on the coach. So so it was kind of intermittent, but it was definitely daily. We also hosted our first Zoom meeting. Here we are switching into that portion in how we prepared, which was different than what we have normally done in the past. We had 30 people who traveled with us, so there are 32 with myself and my husband. And we did host a Zoom meeting. We only had 2 people who were not able to get on that Zoom meeting and actually make it work completely, other than maybe a couple we couldn't see them, but they could hear us. And it did start late because I was trying to get those that one couple on board. We ended up getting them to listen through my phone, and they were able to see us, but we weren't able to see them. And I do believe it was because she had a new device. It was something new, and I don't think the settings were set up correctly. I think if they had been set up correctly, we would have had every one of us on that Zoom meeting, which was super important to have that pre-departure meeting, which we all probably do of some sort. So we did have pretty good luck with our Zoom meeting. That's all I have for that. Kathy, do you have anything to add?
I was pleased because we did have a Zoom meeting with our tour guide. So that was the first time we've ever done that, where I've gotten to meet the tour guide ahead of time. And now that we're doing more of Zoom, it was nice to be able to see him, so that when we got to the airport, I recognized him right away. So I'll just share that part of it anyway. Should
Thanks,
I go on with the airport?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead with your airport experiences?
Okay. So we left out of Des Moines, which is a smaller airport anyway. But when we got there, of course, there weren't very many people in the whole airport. We flew to Chicago. I just want to say before I went, I printed up the boarding passes for everybody. There is a scanning part on the boarding pass now. So if your travelers are going to check their luggage in, they scan that barcode, and then that gets you into the system for them and allows them to print up their, I already had the boarding pass, but the tag that goes on their luggage. If they don't want to check their luggage, then they can just do their carry-on, and they already have their boarding pass all set. So we had 11 people total. We had 9 people that traveled with my husband and I, and then we had 2 more that came from Colorado. So they came on their own. But it was rather simple. I was really thankful, actually, that it was a smaller group to start with. I had told them that they would need to wear masks, and it really was something that they had to have on pretty much the whole time they were in the airport, on the airplane, unless they were eating or drinking. I noticed that some people actually purchased something to drink after they went through the line, so they could actually take their mask down. And that's okay. But on the plane, if you would happen to go to sleep or something, they recommend right away you leave your mask on, but they don't want to have to wake you up to tell you to put your mask on. So, it is required. Our travelers all were immunized before they went. So they all had gotten their vaccinations. So there were 2 of us that were younger that we had at least had one of the vaccinations. So I felt kind of good about that. Again, when we got to Chicago, compared to how Chicago normally looks in the airport, relatively easy to get through. We did have a substantial delay, well, 3 hours or so compared to what we were going to, because the plane that we would have used needed some brake parts. So everybody was we just visited. Everybody was, excited about getting to our destination. So it worked out fine. And like I said, with that small of a group, we could all talk and, just joke about, yeah, we wanted a good plane. And so we actually left about 30 minutes before we were supposed to really be in Norfolk, Virginia. Again, everybody was so excited about, just getting to go and the opportunity that I just didn't have a lot of, people that were upset. They just wanted to get there. So as far as the rules, I think that's pretty much how the airport was. I was really thankful to be able to take this trip, and I'm glad that I can share it with you to let you know that, it's fine to travel if your people are comfortable doing it, and our people were comfortable doing it. This was a group that had been scheduled to go last year and then rescheduled for this year, and no one had a doubt. They wanted to go. They wanted to see some new scenery, and this was a perfect place to go and get, into a little bit warmer climate. And so it was a great experience.
Thanks, Kathy. Oh, I want to mention that Kathy flew on American Airlines, and some of the airlines may have different rules than others. American Airlines was not setting aside middle seats and things like that to allow for more distancing. Amber, what airline were you on?
Well, our group actually flew in two separate groups. I actually flew on American, and my husband's group flew on United. So, and we did have kind of two different experiences with those two different flights, which is something I would like to chat about. The American Airlines did not load from the back to the front. And other than an announcement during one of our flights, did they actually say, try to remain socially distanced as you line up to get on the plane. One time I heard that. Other than that, they just loaded the plane like normal in different groups. They did not offer any drinks at all, nothing. No bottled water, no nothing. I think you could have ordered an alcoholic drink if you wanted, or that, yeah, I think that would have been it. But it's important that you understand that, because gosh, especially with those masks, you really do need to have a bottle of water with you. The first flight, I didn't think in advance because I was, doing my thing, working, and I didn't have a bottle of water, and it just is important, I think, that you discuss that everyone could purchase something to drink and take on the plane with you, because you're just not sure what they're going to offer. United, on the other hand, did load in sections from the section, several rows toward the front. They did that, and they offered drinks just like they would have normally with a cart going up and down. My experience on American, they did expect the masks to be on. Our final flight home, I actually noticed the flight attendant actually walking up every like 5 minutes, making certain, and he wasn't checking for seat belts. He was checking to make sure your mask was on. I didn't actually see him have to say anything to anybody, but I was toward the back of the plane. So they handed you a little wipe, I suppose to wipe off, your little area, but they were saying that they actually, did do a once over between flights. So
Thanks, Amber.
sure.
Why don't you go on ahead with your section now on the motor coaches, both your transfers to the airport, which Kathy didn't have, and your coach at destination.
Sure. Okay. Like Kathy's, our trip was canceled from 2020. And so we had over 40 people initially on this. Our tour really fluctuated anywhere from 44 people up and down, canceling right and left. You've probably seen it, and ending up with 30 people. So initially, Mayflower, we had the conversation that we had to know what we were going to do with these people. We had over 40 people, and that wasn't social distanced. So Mayflower said from, quite a few months behind or in front of us, that they would offer 2 motor coaches. And so they followed through with that, and we departed with 2 separate motor coaches 2 hours apart from our hometown. Then we have to motor coach about 2.5 hours to Chicago. And then we hopped on 2 different planes. Obviously, once we got there, we had 2 coaches. The coaches were 38 passenger coaches. So our group was just enough people to socially distance on those 2 38 passenger coaches. They did require that I give seating chart in advance. Our tour managers, we discussed that with them, and that we also discussed we were not going to have any kind of seat rotation at all unless we had someone have a problem with that. So that worked out, pretty snazzy. Everyone understood that. The tour managers had names on their seats once we actually got there. And of course, you always know you have your certain people who want front seats, so you make sure those people get that. And then you have those in the back that you're thankful they don't mind being in the back. So we did initially find, just to note, if you have a 38 passenger, the restroom sits in the very back, of course, and that final seat really doesn't do you any good because the restroom blocks your view. So luckily, the people who always sit in the back asked if they could move forward, but we had something called pods. And those pods were, in this case, there were 3 couples that were traveling together that sat next to each other that did not require or did not care about having a motor coach seat in between that was empty. So they squished themselves up together. We all kind of just verbally agreed on that. And that allowed the people from the very back to sit a little bit closer. So that worked out great. And it's something for you to, think about when you actually are seating people and getting people on the numbers on each coach. Because if you have pods, the motor coach companies are allowing you to have more, maybe 30 people instead of 26 people on a 56 passenger motor coach, which is what I've been finding so far. Anyway, let's see. Sorry, got to go through these notes. Masks were worn very much all the time. Everyone was super good about doing that. Again, our majority also had been vaccinated. I had not been vaccinated at all, but I had recently had COVID within 60 days. My husband and I had, so we were really already kind of safe in that case for the, giving it and getting it. But the majority, I would say 95% had both shots. A few had 1 shot, but everyone was very cordial to one another. There was a packet given at the beginning of the tour. Instead of giving things throughout with some games. They were very well thought out. Our tour managers, we had 2 tour managers, 1 on each coach at all times, so we were well taken care of. And there was also a Mayflower packet that gave a really cool disposable water bottle. Sherry, Kent, I love that water bottle. That is a fantastic idea to use. And so that was there along with other things, but the packet all came together, also a goodie packet, so you didn't have to constantly be touching things. I also did that prior to the tour. Everything was in a giant Ziploc bag. I mean, it was one of those big Ziplocs, and a water bottle, a goodie bag, our travel card with names on it, that everything was that you normally give, I gave all at once, and then was real cautious as I touched those. We also used gloves as we handed those to people at the beginning of the tour. Just other ideas. Let's see. I think I might have already talked most of this.
That's great, Amber. We can get back to other things if people have questions.
Okay.
Before we move on to the hotels, Kathy, one question I wanted to ask each of you. As I recollect, neither of your banks required that your guests be vaccinated or have had a negative test or have had COVID. Those were not requirements that you guys asked of your guests.
No.
Yeah, thank you.
No, we did not. No. And I think that was important because, you get so political that we tried not to talk. I tried not to talk about that on the tour because I didn't want some people to say, well, you didn't get it, or I did, I didn't. Tried to stay away from that. How about you, Kathy? Was it talked about much?
No, it wasn't even discussed.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I personally was hopeful that they would. As a group grows and you have a larger numbers, you wonder, well, will I have to deal with a person who gets sick? Sometimes you don't want to think about that, but it's true.
I'd be curious too, Ted, if we on the call today, whether we have people having that conversation through their banks, whether they feel they're going to need that or not.
Yeah, we do have some banks who are requiring it. and hopefully we'll hear from them if they're on this call. Let's go on to the hotels, Kathy. In Kathy's case, she stayed in just one hotel for all 4 of her nights, so she didn't have to deal with multiple check-ins and check-outs.
Right. And that was a big plus for me. Ted had sent to me information about the protocols and things for the airlines, the hotels, the bus company. And we did drive some of our customers to the airport, and others got a ride there. But once we got on the plane, I again gave them a copy of our itinerary and the protocols to look at. And Ted had arranged it with the tour guide that when we got to the hotel, that they would give me the key cards, which I handed out to our customers, to our travelers. And so we handed those out so they could go to their rooms. Our bags had already been taken to the rooms while we were at a restaurant eating. So that was all taken care of. And as far as the hotels, the hotel that we stayed in was great. It was really a pretty place, beautiful scenery. The rooms were really well stocked. So they didn't have housekeeping come to do the service like they would typically do every day. But there were extra towels, extra soaps and things like that. And then if you ran out of, say you wanted your towels changed, they had a clothes basket that you would put your towels, washcloths, linens, whatever in. And then the next day they would come by, pick those up. And when you were gone, they would replenish those for you. I don't know if they put them in the basket and you took them in. I'm not exactly sure how that was, because we had plenty for our days. We didn't need to have any extra. If we ran out of coffee, you know how you can have the little pods of coffee in the morning, you could just go to the desk and get extra ones to have in your room. As far as, like I say, the housekeeping is done before you come. And then when you leave, I think there might be a leeway. They might not have somebody in that same room for a few, for, I can't remember if it was 24, 48 or so many hours before they would let anybody else in. But the hotel was huge. The weekends were probably fuller of people, but not so full really during the regular weekday, like Monday, Tuesday when we left, we could tell that there were fewer people there. Restaurant, so the breakfast we had in an adjacent building right across. We could just walk through a walkway to our breakfast, and we had vouchers. It really was buffet kind of restaurant, very well, very clean and everything. And we had plenty of room. The tables were separated. If there were too many people, they would take your phone number. You just go outside and wait, and they'd call you and let you know when the table was available for you. I think that might be enough for right now.
Kathy, you mentioned buffet. It was not self-service though, was it?
It was.
It was, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Amber, how about your experience actually with your touring?
Touring, okay. Touring and the restrooms and such. Okay. Yep. Okay. One of the things that we ran into issues was that the restrooms, as you're traveling from city to city. I'm sorry, my dog is howling. Can you hear the dog?
Yes.
Hold on a second, I'll shut the door.
One thing to note as Amber gives her report is that Mayflower uses whisper devices for their tour guides to make things cleaner and easier to hear. Hospitality Tours did not do that with Kathy, so that'll be an interesting part of the conversation as well.
It's nice to get fresh air from home when you're on a call. But the dog does, she's barking at someone. Okay, anyway, the restrooms are, you can't just travel and go to any restroom up the road. You really have to plan in advance. Our tour managers did very well in that. It's not something you think about. But many places aren't open. Many places won't let a group in. So our tour managers knew in advance. And I know one situation, we were traveling and we needed a rest area done earlier than the planned one. I know our tour managers had to, communicate with both coaches to decide where we were going to stop and make that stop. So they did very well that way, but it's something you don't think about. We need our tour managers or our tour operators for all of those reasons. Those are things that we just can't plan on our own, and they think of those things. Mayflower did a great trip, great idea, or great job in doing that. The whisper devices, I know that Mayflower was hoping that that would be the safest and best way to communicate with one another while we're even on the motor coach. And they just didn't work well for several of our people. Many people have hearing aids, and the devices were to be the ones that you actually put, inside your ear, and that they just weren't working. So after the first day, I brought it to the attention to both our tour managers, and we all kind of had a powwow together, and we decided that it was better for them to use the microphone on the coach. They were the only ones touching that microphone. And then we also decided they would then still wear the masks while they did that, or if it wouldn't be heard, that they would turn and go backwards, basically not looking at everyone. But they did basically look at everyone with their masks on in order to make that work. And it was nice that they worked through that. A suggestion is that, there are other types that could maybe go across the ear, or the ones that kind of cap on top of the ear. So that would be an idea, because the whispers, I think, would work if it works around the hearing aids. That was another safety reason, the safety protocol that Mayflower really paid attention to. So we went to Charleston. Dining out at the city market was very busy. It was their very first weekend open. And so it was busy. There were lots of people, but majority of people had masks on. When you were dining indoors, you didn't see as many masks, and the seats were really not socially distanced a whole lot. But if you sat at your table, you felt pretty safe for that reason. In Beaufort, we had a great opportunity to take the Sea Island carriage tours. I have the phone number if you want those, because it was a fantastic experience. They actually just had started up themselves, and they put plexiglass in between each one of the seats. If you think of a carriage ride, that you can have, I think we could have up to 11 people. And because of that, we had 4 in a row, but we had plexiglass in between. So we were able to travel and get that tour, and which was a fantastic tour. And again, we felt socially distanced in a great way. Savannah, we had the tram, a tram tour that took us around Savannah, and it was a cool day, so the sides were down for the most part, because it was sprinkling a little bit, and most people wore masks. Also, I found myself taking it off. I was at the very, very back, and it was a good opportunity to take it off and have a little bit of a break. You could see people doing that, and then they would put them back on. So again, our group was very cautious in doing that. One thing to keep in mind, that I think it depended on where you went in Savannah. Sometimes the wait at a restaurant was extremely long. We're still waiting for our phone call to get our reservations, actually. They never called us back. It was supposed to be a 20-minute to half an hour, and after 45 minutes, we ended up not getting lunch. Because they could only put so many people in the restaurant, and they just were, I think they just started to come. They didn't have the people waiters are very sparse, that kind of thing. So it is something to keep in mind as you plan your tour itineraries. I believe that you might need some extra time to do those kind of things. The church visit that we went to in Savannah, which was just on your own time, but they very much had COVID protocol with, masks and sanitizing as the rules, only so many in at one time. Okay, that's what I've got for that, Ted.
Thank
Kathy,
you,
do you have
Amber.
any more?
Kathy, if you have anything else you want to comment on what Amber just covered, otherwise, why don't you go right into the dining situation?
Again, we had a smaller group of people, and so we did find that when we were in Virginia Beach and Norfolk, when we were eating on our own, it did seem like it took a long time to get our food, which took away time from shopping or looking in the stores, which I think would have been an encouragement to the people in the communities if we would have entered their establishments too. But we, and I don't know if they are just not as staffed or things just, they just take time. So I guess you make a choice whether you want to eat on your own or if you want to shop on your own. So those are some things. As a group, for the free time, of course, most people ended up pairing up with people to eat. Sometimes we found ourselves eating at the same restaurants. Their tables are typically, separated. There's outside eating at lots of places, which is a good option when the weather's good, or inside and they have it separated. There were a couple times that we ate out and we ended up all together. There were 11 of us. They seated us at the same table. Our final meal, which was at the Isle of Capri, which was part of the hotel, was really nice. And they had separated the group into 3 tables. So 3 sat at 1, 4 and 4. And that gave us opportunities to talk to each other on a smaller scale. And that worked out really well. We didn't have to have masks on when we ate, but when we would get up and move around, then you just put your masks back on. For me, it was a great trip. She was talking about touring. We had an opportunity to take a little ship around Norfolk to see the naval ships, and we didn't have to wear our masks when we were outside, on the boat doing that. Otherwise, when we were walking around town, just if we would go in the shops we went to Nauticus and we had to wear our masks in there. We went and looked on Wisconsin, the ship, and we could take our masks off there unless we were around a lot of people. So I think it just kind of depends on what you're doing, the activity you're doing, if it's outside, if the community you're in allows you to be without masks when you're outside. I'm sure there's some places that you just have to wear them all the time. And it depends if it's crowded or if it's more sparse. So did I answer enough for that, Ted?
Yeah, that's great. Kathy, you also had an experience, which is not a normal dinner, which was the experience at the vineyard in the winery where you had a wine tasting. Explain how that worked.
Okay, so in the wine tasting, so we were inside and it was all at one table, but we were in a separate kind of area. And we didn't have to wear our masks then. That was a really neat experience. I'm not typically a wine drinker, but the presentation of that was really nice and the folks really enjoyed that. But it was really a nice evening, but it was inside. And we were all together, but kind of in a separate room from the rest of the restaurant.
Thanks, Kathy.
Ken?
Amber,
Mhm.
if you have anything else to add to dining, go ahead. But Amber unfortunately had an emergency to deal with. So she gets to share with you what happens with her emergencies.
Okay, I would like to tag just a couple things on Kathy, just because I think it's important to hear both experiences. The buffet breakfasts were served to us at all 3 hotels. And I feel that that's important. They were very nice meals with, sausage. I loved having bacon every day, eggs. They were very similar, but they were very nice full breakfasts, and they were served to us. Also, we had planned dining experiences, and these were in private rooms. And then that was very social distance with large round tables and the tables spread out. Again, they were either plated and served to us with people with masks, and I don't remember if they had gloves on or not. But another experience was like a buffet situation, but they served it to us. Very, very nice meals that were in a private dining area for us. And out to eat, the dining tables, many of them were small and then socially distanced, in separate different things. But our group would say there'd be 4 of us at one table. And at that point, that's how we did dine. A few, I think, chose to have the 6 seats, but those were our pods. So anyway, I just thought those are important because it is, mine seemed to be a little bit different than what Kathy's talking about. So everyone did feel very safe during the tour when it came to even those dining situations, I believe. And I think you could pick and choose on your dining experience and how you want to dine if it's time on your own. So that would be more of a personal thing. Watch for those that are really watching it, or go for it and just go and have a regular dining experience, which is what we chose. So with a few of our group. Okay, emergency on tour. Unfortunately, we had a gentleman that climbed to the top of the lighthouse, 75 years old, and it was 178 steps up, and came down right in front of me as I went to go up. And he ended up collapsing soon after he got down, and he did code. He luckily, the people from Tybee Island had a AED, is that the defibrillator thing, and so they checked and no pulse. They went and got it, called 911, brought it in. My husband and an off-duty firefighter who was from Illinois actually hooked up that AED and shocked him, did CPR, ended up getting the ambulance there, got him in the ambulance. He coded again. So we ended up getting there. He survived. He ended up with open heart surgery, emergency open heart, with 6 bypasses that day. Long story short, just update, he is supposed to be coming home, be transported somehow home this week. Been in communication with the family, but he's got a long road ahead of him, basically intubated for almost 2 weeks, that kind of thing. So anyway, main thing that I took from this is super important to have your emergency paperwork or information with you. Ours, we had it. I had it very available, but I did not have a date of birth. So I took away from that needing a date of birth on your emergency, because this gentleman's traveling by himself. He's lost his wife several years ago. He had a lifetime family friend that knew his birth date, so that worked out well. Luckily, he ended up, which I wasn't aware later, he had his billfold in his pocket, so his ID was there too. Also to have 2 contacts, emergency contacts that was easily available, because once I got to the emergency room, the police escorted my husband and I and got us there behind him. They wouldn't allow anybody in. They would allow one person in, but that person would have to stay with him the entire time because of COVID regulations. And I had just been on the phone to his daughter saying that she was going to come. So we just chose, we couldn't go in. So there's no communication whatsoever. So it was important that they had the contact information, and also that we also then had the contact information. Mayflower Cruises and Tours, our tour manager, they were great. We were on our way to the hospital in the squad car, and the windows down to get some air, and I'm trying to call, and I get a phone call from Mayflower saying, Amber, we know what's going on, because our tour manager called them. I couldn't, it wasn't a good time for me because I was in a bad way of contacting Mayflower, so I hadn't chose to do that. So Mayflower then explained to me that, they could contact my emergency or their emergency name. And I said, please do, because I was not in a good spot to do that with, in the squad like that. And so they did. So then I get the phone call from the daughter. So I talked with her, and so I'd already communicated with her. So it worked out wonderfully how Mayflower used that information. They knew the protocol. Tour manager called them. Mayflower called me. Worked out wonderful. Thank you so much for that. Because it was very reassuring knowing that your tour managers had your back throughout that whole time. As I'm wondering, I don't know what to do. I'm contacting Mayflower and asking, first I asked my tour manager, can we get some names of hotels, some places they can stay so the family can come and stay, so it's not in a slum area or somewhere like that. So Teresa, our tour manager, contacted Mayflower. Mayflower, within an hour, I had a list of 4 places for them to actually to check out and look into. So that was, that was a wonderful experience for me to try to be helping the family from home. So they also helped us gather the contact the hotel in order to gather his things from his room. If you think about all those things you don't think about, but Teresa, our tour manager, contacted the hotel, so it wasn't me just saying it. So they did ask me to go gather the things, and then we made sure it was okay to go through the hotel, and we ended up leaving the luggage there behind because the family then came and got it. I do think that you need to think of all the little details. I felt it was all covered, and I missed something as simple as a date of birth and to have 2. I was never forceful in having, I always had 2 listed, but this gentleman only always had 1 person. And, it was really important to have the second person there because of the emergency, as this was very important. That's what I have. Anyway, we're happy to hear that that he is improving, a very slow improvement, but it sounds like he might be coming home this week to this area to be in hospital. But
Thanks, Amber. And of course, one of the great morals to this story is that Amber had a great communication with her PTO, and the PTOs are your friends, and they're ready to step in and do whatever is necessary. And thank you, Mayflower, for helping her out during all of that. Kathy, perhaps you can give a recap. One thing that you had an experience with, I'm not sure if Amber did or not, was that you had some of our heritage partners from Virginia Beach and Norfolk that were there to meet you and say hello. Why don't you tell us about that experience?
So when we got off the airport, the airplane in Norfolk, Jim Coggins was there to meet us, as well as our tour guide. And he welcomed us, had gift bags for each of our travelers. And that was just a nice welcome. I mean, it really did make our people feel special that someone would come from the CVB. I explained who he was. And then also we went to Norfolk, and Dana, it was on Saturday. She had a lady come, also brought us gift bags and welcomed us to the city there. And all in all, I mean, just those little things, they make such a difference to people to make them feel like they really were happy to see us. And I was trying to think, the hotel, the last day when we were leaving, Ted and John made sure that the luggage was picked up. And so I got to meet one of the head gals from the hotel. And it's just seeing these faces and knowing the people and how they're connected. It really was nice. Ted did a great job organizing the trip. It was really nice to have one hotel. We did have one gentleman who just did not feel well. And so one day he chose to just stay in the hotel, and his wife went along on the trip and she was in contact with him. But sometimes you just have to in this situation where we had one hotel, it was easier where he could just stay there. If we were traveling, it wouldn't be that easy. But then by that night, he was feeling so much better and could join us again. So I think utilizing the partners, the PTOs, it just makes a world of difference to be able to have a good trip and know that you're in good hands and that people have your back and they're willing to help. Just make a phone call. And Ted and I did touch base, and I sent him pictures of the sunrises, different things. So it's nice to have that, person to touch base with and know that they're there to help you at any time.
Thank you, Kathy and Amber, for all of that. I do want to allow enough time here for Q&A. But one of the things I want to just summarize that came out of these two club directors' experiences is that even being well prepared, there are things that are going on that are causing issues. And you have to be prepared, as you are on any tour. I mean, heaven forbid, an airline was delayed again. I can't believe we're back to that. First flight out and already we're delayed by those darn airlines. But the idea that there wouldn't be enough staff in the restaurants when you're on your own for lunches, and therefore they don't have enough time for shopping. These were things that we hadn't anticipated as the PTO, that they would be so short-staffed, and so the guests didn't have as much time for other parts that they were going to enjoy. But I think both club directors and all of the guests would say that they had great experiences and that it was a very safe and enjoyable travel experience. So let's open it up for Q&A. Just unmute yourself and feel free to ask any questions on any matters.
Ed, I'd be curious to know if people are needing to get those certificates that they have been vaccinated before travel. Are the banks insisting on that?
Okay, before we go to that, Amber, Rob, you wanted to ask something?
Before I do that, real quick, if anybody's planning a trip to Springfield or Branson, Missouri, be aware that Springfield, the two major hospitals there, have reopened their COVID units. They've got 40 new cases. They got 9 people in ICU. They're very concerned about Branson because of the elderly population, and most of the tours to Branson are the over 50 group. And they think the wastewater in Branson may be contaminated with a new variant of the virus. And are not conclusive yet, but all indications are pointing to that it is a new variant. Just be aware of that. And if you go to just Google and put in KY3 news, that'll take you to a Springfield television station. And that's where I'm hearing a lot of that at. Some of that was on our local news here in Poplar Bluff too. But anyway, back to your trips. Did you utilize the restrooms on the motor coach? And did you load the coach rear to front and offload front to rear?
Okay, we were told that they were supposed to be, the restrooms were supposed to be used for emergencies, but people did use them. I don't think it was, I think most of the time, people don't like to use them anyway, so they only use them in emergency cases. There was hand sanitizer back there for them. And it was not very easy to load from the back to the front. If you think of any of your tours, once you get on the road, people come and go. Some people are ready to leave and they go sit on the coach and rest for 15 minutes prior to the time you're supposed to get on the coach to depart. You would have literally had to lock those coaches and not allowed everybody on in order to load from the back to the front every time you got on the coach. So you think about that, you know, the coaches are open and somebody comes back, others are shopping still or eating, and, you know, and this coach slowly fills. The one thing that we did try to stick with is that our tour managers and myself did not walk up and down the aisles. Rarely did you see that. And when you did, you felt like you're breaking the rules, that, you know, you joke and say, oh, I'm breaking the rules, you know, that kind of thing, because we rarely did that. But it was in my notes also to mention that it was just not easy to do that kind of thing. I did try to do that at the beginning of the tour. You know, you try to start off right, but if somebody has a good way to do that, that would be great idea, you know, great to share. But I think once you get on tour, it's not easy to do it. What do you think, Kathy?
Well, again, I had a small group and they basically trained themselves. You know, it was kind of a joke, but yeah, we did load from back to front and then get off front to back. So, but again, 11 people.
Sure.
It was easy enough to do that.
Well,
Yep.
and we also
Yep.
did go from front, you know, we unloaded from the front, but that's pretty common to do that. So.
And one follow-up question, and I'll shut up. Did either of you have a plan in place if somebody got sick and tested positive for COVID, what to do with that person and what to do with the group as far as testing, quarantining, returning home, all that stuff?
Mayflower had that intact for us.
Okay.
Yeah, so, and it was in writing, and they had that in writing, that it truly would be, if they were tested positive, that they would be placed in quarantine for up to 14 days. And there was a signature that you had to sign off on that form saying that you accepted that. Also that it said that if I think 2 or more ended up with COVID, that it could possibly be the whole group that got quarantined. So it was actually in place for our group.
Okay.
How about you, Kathy?
I would have been making the call to Ted. That was my plan.
Yeah, our protocols are a little different from Mayflower's. We don't take temperatures as an example. And we also ask that the guests understand their own restrictions from their own places of origin. So in Iowa or Colorado, in the case of Kathy, it's the guest has to have their own responsibility to understand what the quarantine restrictions are back home, because it can go by county, it can go by state, etc. There's too many, literally, for the tour operator to understand what everybody's restrictions are. And it's important, I think, for the guests to also take some responsibility. So if they know what they're going to face when they go back home, that sort of thing, that's very important that they know that in advance before they go on the trip.
And I think thus having the vaccinations done, I mean, was an encouragement to me that they were serious about wanting to travel and be as safe as they possibly can. And they took that upon themselves. I didn't require it.
Is there anyone on the call any bankers on the call, who are requiring that their guests be vaccinated before they can travel, or have tested negative 72 hours, usually that's the rule, before departure, or have had COVID in the last couple of months before departure? Melody is requiring that. Can you tell us more about that, Melody?
We actually haven't started traveling yet, but for motor, anything dealing with, we are, I mean, we're just putting those rules out there that they have to show proof.
And are you getting any feedback from travelers? I guess you're not traveling yet, so maybe you don't have that feedback yet.
I mean, the ones that I have talked to, just about all of the travelers that I've talked to have got the vaccine. So at this point, it's not been an issue.
Yeah. Okay.
Ted, can I add to that? I do have a bank in Illinois that has mandated, like they're doing several trips with us, and some are, like Melody talked about, motor coach, domestic, and then also international. They have made the decision, since they're exclusive departures with the motor coach, they have made the mandate, because they are also working with another partner who is requiring vaccines, that they made the mandate that everybody needed to be vaccinated on their motor coach trips with us. So, I worked with them to, say, okay, that's your mandate. That is not Mayflower's mandate. We will make sure the guide and the tour manager and the driver are all vaccinated. And they said that they were hearing such positive results about it, that their members were appreciative that they were thinking of them. Again, it's not anything that Mayflower is planning on mandating. I know that, Jim and I both talked about that at the conference, as well as having other executives on the call. We're not planning on mandating it, but there are definitely destinations that we're going to that are requiring it. And, so we send that information out to the travelers, and we give them a time frame to say, this is what's required. If you cannot make this mandate, then you can cancel, and we give you your money back, and we all move on. But this bank did it. They're not doing it for international. I mean, I don't know how you can. If the airlines aren't mandating it, you're going to be on a plane with 300 people that may not be vaccinated as well. So, but they did, and they still have full groups going. They had no cancellations from it.
Thanks, Jim.
Yes, that's a great point. So we are now mandating as we opened up earlier this month. So one of three things: you can either prove that you've got the vaccination with the little white vaccination card, that's as easy as it is, or prove that you had COVID and recovered, or have a negative COVID test within 72 hours of arrival. So that is on all Colette trips now, because what we're seeing is that as Europe starts to operate and open, which we're operating Iceland in May, Greece in June, that's exactly what they're requiring. So just to keep it consistent, as well as we think it's a safety measure as well. Just making sure that everybody who is on that motor coach has one of those three criteria that's been met. It's pretty easy to get a COVID test nowadays. You can go to drive-through at CVS or Walgreens and get the test in 24 hours. So not hard to do.
Yeah, and of course,
Jim, is that only for international travel?
It's for all Colette trips as we reopen, Rob. So we're operating right now. If you go to our website, you'll see all the trips that we're operating in 2021. There's more than 50 tours, actually about 35 tours, and over 500 departures right now that we're operating. And that will be added to with the news from the head of the EU on Sunday that said that all Americans that are vaccinated will be welcome in the summertime. So we'll be bringing on more Europe itineraries here this summer.
Yeah, it was some awesome news. News from the EU.
Tammy?
I also, in trips I'm carrying over from last year to finish up for this year, 2 of the PTOs have required waivers be signed, and that everyone on the trip be vaccinated prior to departure. And with that, then I have a mystery trip coming up end of June, and our management decided that we weren't taking anyone that wasn't vaccinated. So, and they're going to have to sign a waiver stating that they were vaccinated. And my people I'm talking to with the reservations, they're not having an issue with it. And actually they said they feel a little safer about that. That they don't have to worry, wondering if the person across the aisle from them has been vaccinated or not.
Yeah. Any other banks that are requiring vaccinations? I know Shelley Morey is in Vermont. She recently made that decision, and she's not on this call, of course. I can tell you from the perspective of a PTO that is not requiring it. For our situation, we only do group tours for Heritage Club banks. So we're not selling anything to the general public. You are our customers. And your customers are yours, not mine. So we want to use whatever protocols you want in place. If you were to ask me what we would recommend, we would very much recommend the requirement to having vaccinations or something similar like Jim was talking about. But we don't require that if your particular bank doesn't want to require it of your members for whatever reasons you have about that. Our guides and our drivers and so on will act as though they have to take every single safety precaution. They're not going to suddenly remove their masks because some of your guests are allowed to remove their masks or whatever it might be. But we would highly recommend that you go that route of requiring vaccinations or testing negative in the 3 days before departure, that sort of thing. But not all PTOs are requiring that, as Jim is, Mayflower is not, and so on.
Well, we're not necessarily mandating it, but obviously, you know, just like Jim said, I mean, there's different areas that have different requirements. So we're sending those requirements out and following the guidelines of any of the countries or states, national parks, you know, Yellowstone National Parks and what their requirements are. So, you know, generally the people who are going to be traveling are either going to be vaccinated or they're going to be tested. And that's because that's what's being required by the destinations.
Yeah, we're not requiring it at this time, but I do have a traveler that said she doesn't think she's going to get vaccinated. So I don't know how to handle that yet.
Yeah, I think that what we'll find as a little bit of time passes, we're still in a real transition time, right? Trips are starting to take off. It's going to become very uncomfortable for people who are not vaccinated to travel. They're going to be given a lot of incentive to get vaccinated. Like if you want to go anywhere, you're going to need it. And so
I did tell her that the airlines may require it even within the states. They haven't done that yet, but there is talk about it. And I did let her know that if she travels internationally, that she will have to have a negative test to enter back into the states and when she goes to the destination. So I was trying to encourage her without encouraging her.
Right.
Yeah, so much easier just to, if you just have the vaccination, makes it easier.
Yeah.
We will actually, excuse me, if somebody does arrive on one of our USA itineraries and they didn't get a negative COVID test, we'll have a few rapid tests that we'll be able to administer as well, but certainly not for, not for everybody, just a handful.
We have a motor coach trip coming up in June, and I have one couple who they asked the question, usually it's a loaded question of you expect that the expectations of the mask will be worn, you try to reassure them for all of those kind of things. And you're reassuring that the majority of people I've run into have been vaccinated. And she turns around and says, well, I'm not going to be vaccinated. That's why I wanted to know. And so she's planning on traveling with us. I've thought a lot about this, and, really, it's not to the point of yet saying that, just because 100% of you have been vaccinated, can you take your mask off? Are we going to say it's okay to take your mask off now that everybody's vaccinated? Or now I have 2 of my 20 people who aren't vaccinated. Well, everyone's needing to wear a mask anyway, so what does it matter? You see where I'm coming from? It's a hard call because, like Mayflower's just said, Sherry just said, you're not changing your protocol. So, for me to say you can't go, I don't feel like, we can't go, because I feel our safety measures at this point will remain the same. Have you guys thought of that? I mean, have you run into that?
We definitely believe that as states and countries approach herd immunity and people are vaccinated or they've had COVID, we think we're going to be up to 75% capacity on motor coaches by summer, and we could be even at full capacity by fall. You might even see some redirection from the CDC with recommendations on masks as we hit that area as well. So I
Maybe
guess it
just take
remains
it
to
a
see.
little at a time. Maybe
Right.
that's the way we have to do that and look at that. Like I said, mine is in June. It's coming up very quickly. And it's a 7-day motor coach. So at that point, I'm just trying to tell everybody we'll be wearing masks.
Yeah, we feel pretty confident because we operated from July through October last year, even before there were vaccines. So we operated with those protocols. We had no incidents. We had over 1,000 guests that traveled with us on more than 50 departures. So we feel pretty confident with that experience moving into this year, especially with things so much, getting so much better with vaccines and caseloads and herd immunity coming. All good news.
Mhm.
Jim, the CDC is supposed to release new guidelines today, as a matter of fact, about fully vaccinated people and mask inside, outside, that type of guidelines.
I'd like to know how you can go about, how are you going about telling everyone you have to be vaccinated before you take this tour? Is that a club thing? Is it in your club newsletter? Or is it just as people sign up? Because it's possible that that is something we end up going toward. And I'm curious to know what you've done for those people who are mandating this. Tammy?
Tammy?
I have used it in my radio ads when I've been advertising and in my monthly e-notes, my newsletter. I've got it right in there.
Melody, how about on yours? Are you still on the call? I think Melody must have bounced off. Okay. Yeah, I think that in general, you want to keep your eyes very much on the CDC changes. But always, you probably want to err on the side of caution. That is, don't suddenly say, it's okay not to wear masks because the CDC says that, in a private home with 5 people who are all vaccinated, you don't need to wear your mask. So you want to be really careful about that. There may become a time soon enough that we will be without masks. But while you're operating and selling your tours now, I think you're wise to be safe. And the worst case scenario then is that things get eased up, and while you're on tour, you don't have to wear your mask as much. But if they're all prepared to wear their mask when they go on tour, then you're probably in the safest position. And that's just the mask question. Any other questions with regards to the actual operations of the tour that you want to ask Amber or Kathy or the PTOs? Well, we can certainly open it up to anything else if you have. Tammy, you have something you want to ask?
I'm just curious on motor coaches. Was that cleaned every night after you returned to your hotel? Or cleaned in the morning before you took out, or did they do it in between times during the day when you were off the coach?
We were told that it was going to be done daily. I think it was done at the, in the evening. From my recollection, just hearing somebody saying by the time we drive back and clean the coach and then, get back to the hotel, I heard, one of the drivers say that. I didn't actually ask, except that it was talked about at the beginning of the tour that it would be done daily. I don't know if it was done any more than that. But I do know that it was done daily. One of the things too that I had in my notes too, that the drivers, how normally they would help you with your hand as you walked off the motor coach or get back on the motor coach. They did not do that. The driver stood there, or the tour manager stood there in case somebody needed that help. If you asked for help, then they would do that. They would give that to you. But for the most part, they did not offer a hand and help you down, the steps or help you up the steps. There were a handful that, that they did do that. But that was something that was different. Again, the driver was there in case there was, a trip or something like that. But it was something that was a little bit more unique than what you would expect. I like my people to be there and have a hand offered in case they need it. So,
Kathy, how
Thank
about
you.
on yours?
I don't know that. I guess I don't know. Our bus was clean. We're clean people, and there was only 11.
Did you have a full-size motor coach, Kathy?
It was
56?
52 or 56 passenger, and so, but people tend to sit in their same spots. You know, we're creatures of habit, and so that's kind of just how it was. But I'm sure they cleaned it. I mean, but I don't know how
The-
often.
The instructions the motor coach company were given were that they had to have a full cleaning at the end of each day before the next day started. But also, while the guests had gotten off the coach in order to go to an attraction, whatever it might be, that the driver was to wipe down the surfaces that they put their hands on. So the rails along the top and the backs of the seats, that sort of thing. Not something you would necessarily notice when you came back on the coach, as Kathy, I hope that they were doing that, but I wouldn't know if I wasn't there.
Mhm.
And in Kathy's case, her guide, John and Kathy, were to talk about whether they wanted to do a daily seat rotation. That is, our policy is that you do not rotate seats during a given day. But if you want to change the seats by the next day, then you can have a rotation and you stay in those seats for that entire day. And that's a decision that you as the group leader and the guide can make together. It's not a requirement that we have. But the only requirement we have is that you wouldn't do a seat rotation during the course of the day.
We also found too, once we got at our final destination, which was O'Hare, we still had a 2.5 hour to 3 hour drive home. And once I got on the motor coach, making sure that all the luggage was underneath, I looked up and everybody that had been socially distanced on this, you know, this coach the whole time, everyone was sitting right next to each other at the very front of the coach. It was like they were over it. They were comfortable with each other. They were still wearing their masks, but everyone sat in every different row. No one socially distanced. I didn't argue with it. You know, we had sat next to each other for meals and that kind of thing. And at least this time they had their masks on, but it kind of made you chuckle because, you know, the natural humankind wants to be close to each other. And it really was reassuring knowing that Mayflower and Central Bank had put together a tour that they felt very comfortable at the end of 7 days that they could sit near each other. So that was, I felt that was kind of comforting. But for the most part, you know, we followed suit with every other seat unless those pods were happening.
So on the motor coaches, I understand that every other seat, but did the motor coaches have plexiglass in between each set of seats? No.
Mm.
Okay.
I'm not familiar with companies that are doing that. Ryan, are you familiar with companies that are doing that?
I do know that there have been one or maybe two coaches in the entire fleet that have done that, and it's based on contract work. That's daily work for certain organizations, but as a whole, for tours and traveling, it's not something that we've done.
Yeah,
And they're
okay.
wearing masks on the bus the whole time. Anyway, they are wearing their masks.
Yeah. Well, I just know I haven't been on tour, but I have been on a big coach for public transportation between here and the airport. And they had plexiglass between each row of seats. So each seat had its own plexiglass right around the headpiece.
Yeah, interestingly, 2 days ago, I guess it was Friday, I don't know if you heard this or not, Doreen, because it's relevant to you in Vermont. Vermont Secretary of State announced that they were no longer putting restrictions on the numbers of passengers on charter motor coaches. So you can now put 40 passengers on a coach. You no longer need to socially distance. So if you were, now I don't know how that affects when you leave Vermont, because, right, you don't just go in Vermont when you leave Vermont, you got to go somewhere. So you're going to New Hampshire or Massachusetts or wherever, and then you have to fall under their restrictions. But Vermont apparently has lifted that for travel around Vermont.
Oh, really? I didn't expect them to lift it until July 4th was the
Yeah.
last that I heard, but
We were
I
all
guess they're
surprised
really
by it.
early.
I got a copy of the notice from one of our bus companies up there, from Lamoille, you know, the preview, and to say they were so excited to see this had just come in. So
Perfect.
apparently it's true.
So how does that affect, say, my trip I'm planning with Hospitality Tours, and Illinois still has the guideline of, we got to get from here to Chicago, still can't have a full coach.
Yeah, your tour to Vermont though isn't until 2022, so I wouldn't worry about that too much right now.
If it were 2021,
Right.
that would still not be feasible. Is that how that would, or maybe 2 coaches to Chicago, and then you fly and you tour Vermont? Okay, I see. There's a way around everything.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Mel Hopper, who apparently has hopped on the call here. Mel is at the Norfolk Convention Visitors Bureau. You have all met Dana, and Mel works with Dana there. And I don't know if she's still there, but anyway, Mel, thanks so much for helping Kathy with her tour to Virginia Beach and Norfolk. Anybody else have anything?
Amber, Kathy, can I ask, and I probably missed it because I was a little late getting to the meeting. I'm sorry, I was on another call. Can I ask, did you have any issues, anything different with TSA through the airports, or did I just miss that in the earlier conversations? Same as it was before?
Kathy?
So I would say security is security. When we had, so on the way home, and this is a reminder for all of you, if your passengers choose to carry on their bags rather than check them, they should not put wine in their carry-on. Oh, she was disappointed to think somebody else at the hotel, at the airport, was probably going to enjoy that wine that she bought. She just, she knew it. She had the small 3-ounce, things she was carrying, and then she just ended up putting her wine on. TSA, they look at your photo ID. They have you put your mask down, put it back up, and go through. I think we had to take our shoes off, unload the pockets, same basic things, I think. But just reminding our customers before they go of, keep your ID close, your boarding pass close, just some of those basic things. They're not rummaging through, but there's not the lines like you would typically see. Anyway, for me, going from Des Moines, Chicago, and then to Norfolk, the airports weren't that busy.
I agree. Also, the airports weren't super busy. We also had the same experience. They said, please take your mask off. I did ask because we had handed everyone a little travel. Well, it's probably only a 1-ounce hand sanitizer to everybody that had our bank logo on it, and it had a little tally thing on it that you can put on, outside of your purse or your whatever, and it's not within your 3-ounce, bag. And someone had asked me, I had not thought about it. Someone had asked, and I said, well, if they take it, they take it. That's the case. So I asked because, as I was going through, and they just kind of acted like, no care. Now, of course, that could be each individual gate attendant, but they did allow that hand sanitizer to go through that was attached to my purse. That was the only thing different I saw, other than it was kind of nice going to the airport, not having the crowds. I will say that as our gate loaded, all of a sudden you had all these people all together, and it looked like a normal day. You didn't know that the airport wasn't that busy, because at that point you had people upon people upon people that was trying to get all in together.
There was a point when the airlines were first trying to figure out all the safety protocols that I was curious about whether or not these rules were still in place. It sounds like they aren't, but they were trying to avoid boarding passes. So avoiding paper as much as possible, and have all of your boarding passes be electronic on your phones, so they're not exchanging paper. But in both of your cases, you were exchanging paper.
Well, we just were, so they have a scanner when you get ready to go on the airplane, and as you are checking in, you just turn your scanned boarding pass over and scan it yourself. Unless you have it on your phone, it would be the same thing.
That's at the gate, but it's security. Did you do that as well?
No, they did take it at the TSA area. Yeah, they did take it and look at it, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, so even the rules we think they're out there, we might tell you about, they might change by the time you actually get there.
Mhm.
Exactly. And I think it's going to be airport to airport because I just flew out of Boston and they didn't even check my boarding pass at all. And what I had to do, they had a machine that I had to put my license in, my ID. And then it read it, and there must have been a screen that they looked at. And then they asked me to, remove my mask a bit between me and the plexiglass and them, and then put it back up, and away we went. So I do believe that it is going to be from airport to airport, and how many new devices they really have out there.
Yeah, interesting. Before COVID, I was a member of the CLEAR program, which is identification through your eyes or your fingerprints. And I understood that they removed the fingerprint part of it, so that you were just doing optical proof. And I thought they were going to really make that universal because of COVID, so you wouldn't be having to deal with all this paper stuff, but I guess they haven't done that. Boston has that program.
Ted, I'd be curious to know how many people are actually moving forward with travel tour plans this year.
Yeah, can we have maybe we can do a quick poll, Tina, for any of you bankers that have a group travel plan more than a day trip in 2021. I can tell you that for hospitality tours, between now and the end of the fall season for us, our Heritage Club banks, there are probably a dozen or so that are actively selling and expecting to operate their tours. And that's a good chunk of business in the next 4 or 5 months. So we're quite pleased by that. But did you have a poll there, Tina, you can toss up?
What is the question? I am planning to travel in 2020 or in 2021.
Beyond a day trip. I'm talking about groups. Do you have a group planned in 2021?
I'll just add that we're pretty excited because we just finished our first international tour in 13 months. We had a group go to Costa Rica for 9 days.
Nice.
Actually, Dan Sullivan, our CEO, was on that trip. We're also operating Panama. So we restarted operations in 21 this month with many USA itineraries, Costa Rica, Panama, Iceland comes on board next month, and then Greece in June, with over 500 departures right now, and we'll add more to Europe as that opens up in June. But just also to let you know, I've done in-person presentations recently. 2 weeks ago in Ohio, we had 170 people show up for a travel show, signing up for trips in 2021. Did the same thing in Michigan last week, of all places. Had about 30 people join us for a trip leaving in October of this year. We did it in Wisconsin too. In Fond du Lac, we had 70 people show up in person in Fond du Lac.
Wow.
For trips leaving this year. So there's a lot of demand. If you joined us on the conference a month or so ago, we talked about revenge spending and travel, and people really having the demand and the desire to go, and it's happening.
And I can concur that the travel presentations, what Jim talks about, is definitely true. I just managed the East Coast BDMs for Mayflower, but we recently had 47 people show up in Mississippi for a travel presentation, very successful. And then in Pennsylvania, which is Yeah, way farther north, so I was surprised, but yeah, they had 40 people show up for a travel presentation there, and both were very enthusiastic, and the people were signing up. So I'm glad you said that, Jim, and I just want to test he's not lying. I have 2 that just happened this week, so it's definitely a great thing to see, because that's a great way to get people to sign up again.
Michael doesn't mean to say, Jim, that if he weren't here, we would all assume you were lying.
He
I didn't mean
say
that. I
exaggerate.
just wanted to second the motion.
He didn't even say exaggerating.
I don't have any update, and Jim, I don't know what you or Michael do on the Canadian border situation. It remains closed. There seems to be some real optimism, but nothing affirmative at this point.
Yeah, we don't have anything affirmative. We have our general manager of our Canada office is on the board of CATO, which is like the USTOA in our country. But we're hopeful that by the end of summer, borders are going to open up. That's what we're planning for and hopeful for.
We're also really hopeful about Canada, but just so you know, we just had to cancel our Alaska, departure with the cruise, the land and the cruise portion, because that inside passage docks all in Canada, and we really just don't have, the cruise lines don't have enough direction that they think they're going to be able to dock. So we're hopeful, just like Jim, but Canada is a tough one. So mostly when people are buying or looking at promoting it, we're trying to push them to 2022, and make sure they focus at least that far out.
We do have Alaska by land that we're operating though this year.
Yeah,
June and July.
We don't do anything by cruise. We still have our July and August and fall business on the books for Canada, with the hope that something will happen for July, but I've really doubt that July will be open for us, but I feel pretty strongly for the fall and maybe even August. Amber has a tour coming in early September coming up, so we're going to make that one go, even though the border's closed.
Yeah, and I wanted to say there's nothing wrong with Alaska land. So if you're looking at that with anybody, Alaska is fine. It's just that cruise portion does the inside passage. So when you have a trip that combines those two, they might have to look at just going land only. A lot of people, they want to do it together with that big cruise. So, it just depends on the group.
Yeah, we had to work around a similar situation with our Niagara Falls tours. We left Canada, but we're still doing them in New York, so that they don't have the same view, but they have a great experience regardless.
Well, I've got the results of the poll, whether you're taking a group out for an extended tour in 2021 or not. Yes, by 85% and no 15. So that's good news.
Thanks.
That's 11 yeses and 2 nos.
Right.
I'm one of the no's. So I hate to be the Debbie Downer here, but my bank came to me. I came back to work. This is my 3rd week back. They came back in the 2nd day I was here and told me that we're not going to do any travel in 2021 either. And I said, none? I mean, I had a meeting with the bank president and my boss, and I couldn't convince them to change their mind on that. So, I was going to retire next year. It's going to be this year. So, I probably won't get to see you all at next year's conference, but it's been a real pleasure, and I will send a little letter so they officially put it in the Heritage Club news. But yeah, I'll be probably retired by the end of May. So it's unfortunate. I don't know what their thinking is. I don't know about the club, whether it will go on, Ted. I hope it will, but at this point, I wouldn't bet the rent money on that, which makes me very, very sad. But I've done everything I could to get it to go, and I'm just not going to sit here and not plan trips for another year. I did that all last year. I just don't. I don't think I can do it for another year. So, and like I said, I was going to go next year anyway. So. It's been a pleasure though, everybody. So thank you for allowing me to be part of the family. And I will look forward to letting you know my home email address. So if anybody wants to keep in touch, and my cell phone, you can call me anytime. I might do something on my own as far as travel. So don't count me out.
I think we can plan a retirement party for you though, and have it via Zoom like we did for another colleague of ours. So let's chat and get that in our newsletter so we can
I will do
celebrate
that
with you.
Renee and I have been speaking while she's been going through this problem to see if there's anything that Heritage Clubs can do to help. And it's clear that they're not accepting that help right now. And we're hoping that be some sort of succession planning, but it sounds like they didn't accept that idea yet. Renee, we are a different organization without you than we are with you. We're going to miss you very, very much.
I'm going to miss you all more.
Yeah.
More.
Don't be a stranger.
In my life for a while, and I'm going to miss that. So that's what I say. I actually am going to take a group with Mayflower next year on my own. All the people that were going to go this year decided that they would like to transfer to next year, and I knew at that time that I wasn't going to be employed here at the bank anymore. So I asked them if they'd like to go with me, and I would basically do the same thing I would do if I was their director. And they said yes, and they all signed back up, and we signed the contract over into my name. And so I'm going to hope that Europe is open next March to do that tulip time tour. So if that's successful and if that goes well, then y'all might get some business. So I know all your contacts anyway.
All right.
Okay. I think we should stop the recording for those who will be watching this after the fact, unless there's any other final questions related to our topic. Okay.